Hi everyone. In today's video, we're gonna build natural language to SQL chatbot using LangChain. And before I show you demo, let me tell you what we're gonna cover. So the first thing, we're gonna build the basic natural language to SQL model that can take user, let's say natural query or question and convert into the SQL query. Next, we will see how can we add a few short examples so that we can improve the model performance. Next, we will see instead of having those fixed few short examples, how can we select those relevant examples dynamically based on the user query. We will see what if we have a large DB with hundreds of tables. How do I make sure I only select the relevant tables because we can't put all the table schema inside the, let's say, prompt. First of all, it's not the feasible, and the second thing, it's gonna cost a lot. Next, we will see how do we customize these prompts, and finally, most important, how do we add memory to the chatbot so that it can answer the follow-up questions. Now here is our chatbot. Let me ask some basic questions. And one more thing, we do have something called LangSmith that will help us to know what's happening, for these steps under the hood. So let me ask some simple questions. Maybe I ask, um, I will ask how many orders do we have. I should also tell you what database I'm using, that will help. So MySQL sample DB, I kind of I should have put that link somewhere. I think, yeah, this one is the MySQL sample database that I'm using, basically, which has data related to the customers orders, and here products are something related to cars. So you can see this is what the schema what we have, and I go back here, we have total 326 orders. So that's how it has generated. Now let's look at what's happening under the hood. So let me go back to the LangSmith and let's look at the query that we just fired, which is, the how many orders do we have? And if you look at the final output we got is something called, we have got 326 orders. But let's see what's happening, under the hood so that we understand. The first step, how did it choose the tables to use? So this is the first thing. It has limited the tables. Now you could see it has only used the table called orders. So based on the user query, it decided instead of using all of this table, only that particular table information should go inside the prompt called the orders. And we can verify that thing. So if I go to the next thing where the query got generated, which is here, if you look at, this is where, sorry, not, this is where the query got generated. And the model prompt, if we look at, which will have only the orders table information. So you can see it has only the orders table information and no other table information, only the orders table information. We can also see when this particular thing was what few short examples were added. So let's say we can see something related to the product, and next was also related to, let's say, what, list of customers or something. So basically, think of, so I have only few relevant examples, so they might not be the good, but I will tell you what's happening under the hood. So we got these two examples. One is called listing products with specific something, and then we got, let's say, another thing listing, customers, let's say, with certain credit. Now if I go back and now ask, let's say, different thing. Now I ask, okay, about and employees. Now let's see what happens, because this is a follow-up question. It is assuming that it knows what is my first question, which was I was asking how many orders. So ideally now I'm asking how many employees do I have, right? That's what I'm asking now. It is understood that I'm asking about the employee. That's what I call asking the follow-up question. Now let's see, to answer this question, what tables did it choose, and what let's say the few short examples it choose. So let me go back here and go back to, again, this is our latest query called employees. Again, we're gonna see all of this thing. I just wanted to give you the glimpse what's happening. So this was our question and this was the final answer we got. But let's look at this particular step, which were choosing the table, and it only choose the employee table. That's what I mean. It is able to dynamically choose what we should use, and then we can confirm this. If I go to the part where the query is generating, and if I look at the OpenAI call and the prompt, I could see now inside the prompt we have employees table and it's a sample records and nothing else, because that's what is required. And if I go back, now let's see what sample examples we selected. See, the sample example this time is something related to the employee, right? And this was product, because why? Because we are taking anyway two sample examples and we don't have threshold, so whatever the best matching, it is coming. But what I wanted to tell you, if you have a good library of these few short examples, eventually you will have matching example. At the moment I have only 5 or 6 example for the demo purpose, and that is the reason you could saw when I ask about the products or the customer, we got something related to that. When I ask about, I got something related to the employee. And maybe if I ask, let's say something, inspired by this particular thing, let's say customers in France with credit, something like that. Okay, let's ask this one. We will ask a customers, let's say customers with the credit. I would ask how many customers first of all. How many customers with credit limit over 20,000, and let's see this time what it selects. So something 97, but let's say we go back to here and let's see whether we see that something related to the credit, that example got selected or not. And we know it's here somewhere in the query generation. And this time it selected the table called customers. What else? And it also selected payment. So because see, now it require multiple table, that's why it selected the multiple tables. What I wanted to show you, you can see now. So we got something related to the customer and credit as a few short sample example. This is one example, this is another example, right? So both are relevant to what we asked. So we ask about how many credit and the customers, so it is related to, let's say, payment and all. And we saw the examples also, the two examples that we selected from this, these are also relevant. So you can say this is working. We are able to select dynamically examples and dynamic tables that we using here. Now let me go back and maybe let's say ask how many customers I asked, right? There are 97. So anyway, let's go now and actually see how we can implement this particular thing, right? Now what we will do, we will start with the basic, we'll start with the notebook. We will start building the basic flow as I mentioned here, and then eventually once we have everything with the good understanding of what's happening under the hood, then we will simply take that code and I will create this Streamlit application. And this is what we will see finally. So I hope have a patience so that we understand what's happening under the hood, right? Once again, this is the schema. I will give this link so that you guys can use this particular schema or thing if you want for the practice purpose. Let me go back to now notebook. And first thing I want is to install all the relevant LangChain things like LangChain OpenAI, because I'm going to use the OpenAI model. The next thing, let's say the LangChain community. Then we have this LangChain normal, and then MySQL DB, because I created and put this database into the AWS RDS so that I can access it remotely. And then finally DB as one of the vector database I want. So basically this is my credential, which I will change later. And to start with the basic natural language model, what we can do, first of all, we need to declare a database instance. Now this is crucial. So you can go and find based on your database what you want. So basically this is SQL alchemy syntax kind of a thing. So if you know the that particular that SQL alchemy engine, so we have a class called SQL database from the URI, and we need to construct this URI string. So for MySQL, this is the string. For the, let's say, PostgreSQL or for the other database, you can check what particular documentation and what thing you require. So for us, the basic we require is, let's say, DB user password and this thing. And if I run this thing, I will get the database connection object, or let's say engine, and then I can print certain information. So let me print this thing here. So you can see what all things I am getting here. So the first thing, dialect, whether it's SQLite, MySQL, PostgreSQL, that information is a part of this DB variable. Next thing, get usable table name. This is important because this tells us in this particular database, we have this many tables, the customer, employees, and offices, and all of those things. And finally, you might be wondering from where does those information used to come. When we saw here, those table information, right? They used to come from this particular variable called db.tableInfo. This variable is responsible for that, and you can see by default it has all the table information. So this is the customers table, and then it will have some sample records from the customer. So for example, so let's say we have something called credit limit, and this will help model to understand how does the credit limit value looks like, right? How does that number looks like, something like that. That will help those sample records. Similarly, we have employees table, and all of those tables, actually down we have all those tables, including those 9 tables or something what we have. Next, how I'm getting these things coming here. So this is called something a LangChain LangSmith tool, which help us to track what's happening, whenever you run certain things, right? So you can watch any specific video if you want on the LangChain, LangSmith. Whatever it requires for this particular video, I'm gonna cover and I'm gonna explain all the things what we saw here. So let me go back. To do that particular thing, we need to do this thing. First of all, we have to activate this tracing by setting this particular flag, and then you will get this key if you go and create account on the LangSmith. At the moment, it is you will get, I think, 3,000 runs free. So I have been using, and I have, let's say, 200 runs or something. So you all can use this freely, and this actually helped me learn LangChain much better, because now I understand what's happening, under the hood, and it has improved my understanding. Next, all we know that we're going to require the OpenAI API key. So I'm just setting those environment variable. Now this piece of code is our basic, what I call natural language to SQL thing. Basically, LangChain has one chain, this particular chain. So if you're not familiar with the chain and all of those things, I had also created one beginner friendly tutorial called LangChain expression language. This covers everything. So basically, chain means you are able to put together a different components of the language, and you can execute them in a particular fashion. So you can call them chaining together. So what those component, large language model is one of the component you have. Next could be your prompt is another component. Then you have vector database is the one component. So all of these things you can arrange in a particular fashion, and then you can execute. Think of this what we just discussed, right? Each of this will be one step or component in our chain, and we can execute them in a particular fashion or sequence, and we can call this as a chain. Or you can think of, we can create the chain out of other chains. So we will see that all of those things. So LangChain provides a chain called, let's say, SQL chain that we can create using this create SQL query chain function, or whatever call it a class. What it requires? It requires two things. The first, the LLM itself, because you need a large language model which will understand the schema and generate that, the corresponding SQL query. And definitely the DB details, the DB instance we saw, it has everything what we require. So let's try. So we're going to ask, what is the price for a particular product name, because we know that product exists, and see what happens. This basic piece of code, okay, we got some error because I think I haven't run the above cell, right? The OpenAI cell. Let me run again. And you could see we got the SQL query corresponding to this particular natural query what I asked, which is what is the price of this particular thing. So I think to get the price, it needs to go to maybe the product table to get that particular price. So this piece of code, creating SQL query with the LLM and DB instance, is what you just need if you just want to get that particular SQL query. And now we can go, since it's a simpler equation, we can see what has happened under the hood. And since we have activated this, now let's go and see this particular query what we just asked. So if I go here, every time I run any chain, I get this particular run here. They call it, I think, trace, or run, whatever, the terminology I might not be the perfect, but I can see the select by price, or the what is the price is what I just asked. Now if I click here, I can go into that particular sequence what has all this happened. This whole thing is one chain execution that we just did, everything. So when I click on the top, it tells me directly what came and what I got as an output. So it came as a question variable, it came as what is the price, this is the natural query, and this is what finally I got as an output. Then I can see, okay, but what's happening in the middle? So these are the certain things happen in the middle. But let's say we look at what happened when we call the OpenAI model. So let's click on this, and then you can see what input it got. So when we call this function, you can see it got some prompt. Now we haven't created any prompt. It means this is the default prompt coming from the LangChain. So if I go, I can see literally there is a big prompt is there, and then it has some format of that prompt, then it has details of the customers table, It has details of customer sample record, the employees table, the employee record, and everything it has. You can see it has all the tables information. And finally you can see our question, and we are saying we are now expecting the SQL query, and the model has given SQL query, which is here. This is why it is important to have this thing, selecting or dynamic, let's say selecting the relevant table. Why? Because we saw to answer this particular question we were only required this products table, but we put lot of information there including all the tables, the schema. So let's go back again there. And if you observe in the LangChain, or let's say in ChatGPT anything, we have, since it is a conversational model, chat is a conversational model like a ChatGPT, it has something called messages. So if you say there is something called human, there is something called AI, those are nothing but the message types. This tells a this whole request is going inside the message, let's say from the human, and the model output is called the AI message. This is the AI. But what you see here is just the plain string. But then how does we got this plain string? So you can see there is something called the output parcel, which simply converted that AI message. You can see the input was the AI message, but the output is simply a plain string. This is we got it. So this really helps us to know what's happening at each stage. Now let's go and create the more complex example. Now we know what if you want to execute this query. So to execute this thing, LangChain provide a tool to execute the SQL query. It is called the SQL, let's say the query SQL database tool. That tools require your DB instance, and then you can invoke any query. So I just have this particular query, right? Now since we created, let's call this particular step as execute query step. As I told you, in LangChain we can combine this thing, and that's what we're gonna do. But let's look at this as an individually. Let me execute this particular step called execute query, and you can see I got two values. Actually those two values are associated with this buy price and maybe this one, right, the MSRP, this particular price, and I got. So this is how I can execute the query. Now this was, I guess, also a chain. I hope it is a chain. Let me go and see whether it is recorded there or not. Yes, I guess it is recorded. So even this one particular thing what we just did is a chain. What we did, this one was also in a chain, and this is also in chain. So we got something. Let's see what we got here. This will be basic because there is nothing, right? No intermediate step. It has only one action. It took this particular query and just executed. Nothing has intermediate steps. Go back to this. Now let's combine. This is what called chaining or the lang chain. Now we took one chain which was actually generating the query, and then we see, hey, whatever the output of this particular chain, I want to give the input of this particular thing, and you can see what there is expecting as an input. So here, we are passing this particular input. So we are now chaining in the steps, and then final chain we got. Now we can execute, so that it should create the query and it should also execute it. Let's see. Now I'm asking, let's say simple thing, see how many orders are there. It is saying there are 326 orders. So two things happen now, right? Now let's see, the LangChain graph will be a bit complex now. Let's look at it, because now it has two steps, right? So even first thing, the final thing, I asked this question, I got this particular output, but it has multiple steps. See what's happening. So first thing we will see, okay, so here we can see our model part. The model got that same human message that what we had, and then we got this AI message. Then we know that finally it converted into the simple thing, which is the plain thing instead of AI message. And then after that, you can see there is something called SQL DB query that's getting executed. That took our query as an input, and then we got. So this is how, if I click on the overall thing, this, and we got output. Basically the two things happen, this one and this one. Now let's make it more complex. Okay, I was telling you, right, that we saw there is some prompt already and we haven't given anything, but we can print that prompt and see actually what is the format of prompt. So we have this chain, we should be able to see its prompt. You can see your MySQL expert based on what we have provided detail. This is the format it has. And you might be wondering, this is our input, the query that we are asking. This goes there, And then table info is the variable that we saw earlier, right? A big information this about the tables and all. So this is the prompt if you want to see. Don't worry, we're gonna see how can we customize this prompt, because that's how we're gonna add those few short examples and all those things. Great. Now, once we have a basic things running, but isn't it, it's very ugly, right? So you don't want to show a user this response what we got from the DB. You don't see this thing, right? You see a proper a rephrase response from the for the human. Let's do that thing the next, right? Now what we do, let's create one more prompt which will take all of this information, which will take our query, what we ask, which will take the natural query, SQL query, and the final result we got, and it should rephrase the answer. That's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna do this a prompt. We're gonna create the prompt in the LangChain if you're not available. So we can import something called in a prompt template, and this template we can create from a template. So template can be created from message list of messages also. Prompt template you can think of it's like an F string or a string with placeholder. That's it. This particular thing from a template is nothing but the string with the placeholders what we have here. So let's say we create one prompt where we say that, hey, we're gonna give you the question what user asked, the query that we generated, and the result we got from the DB. Can you rephrase this answer for the user? And then we can test that thing here, right? Now this is what that rephrase thing is doing. So this is another chain. What is happening here? We are taking a prompt. First thing is a prompt. Then we are passing our LLM, which we declare on the top, which is the Chat GPT, GPT 3.5, and then something called output parser. So you have also seen this output parser coming here, right? So output parser is basically, string output parser is going to take this AI message and give it like a plain string. So that's what we have added there. Hey, first let the prompt go through the LLM, and we know that the LLM output is actually an AI message. We want to make sure that AI message get converted into the plain sentence, right? But we need to combine this step with the earlier two steps what we had. Earlier we have generate, execute, and now we have a rephrase answer. So let's combine these three steps in a final chain here. Now you might be wondering, what is this? What's happening here? So basically this syntax runnable pass through assign. So runnable pass through is the way we are able to pass this, let's say any input to this particular chain, and this is how it is able to use that particular thing. The this can use using this, but this dot assign, what's happening in the dot assign step that we can see again in the LangSmith. This is what my understanding. This particular step, when it runs, you can see what's happening. We are assigning something to this variable called query. And what is that thing? Whatever the output that we're gonna get from the generate query. So the first step of this particular chain is actually executing a generate a query chain or a step, and take the output of that particular query and assign to a variable called query. That's the first thing. Now we got one variable called query. Next is what? Next step, we are creating a variable called result. How? Again, we are using assign by the output of this. So we are taking first step. Now this particular step is made up of two small steps. One is extracting whatever is the query. So we are taking whatever we put inside this query variable, we are taking that and we are passing that query to the next step is called the execute query, and the output of that execute query will go here inside this result. So we just created values for the two variables. One was the query, other one was the result. Why? Because if you look at the prompt, which is after that, the rephrase answer chain require three things. It require question, query, and result. Question we anyway passing as the input, so it is anyway available there. But then we also created two variables. One is called the query variable, other called the result variable, right? See, this is what my understanding, and this LangSmith helped me understand what's happening under the hood. So let me run so that we all are on the same page what's happening. So let's run this particular, so that instead of seeing the DB result, we see the actual output. So it is now saying there are total 326 orders. Let's go back to the LangSmith and see what's happening. Let's see the recent one. Okay, this is what we asked. Now you see it became more complex because now there are multiple steps. So this one is the one step. Let me see, I could collapse. Yeah, collapse. So This is what my understanding. So whenever we did something called assign, I'm thinking like this, that this whole step is about assigning something to this variable query. This whole step is about assigning a value to the variable called this result. Right now, let's see. Look at the query part. When I click on the query overall part, here is the overall. This is what I asked, how many orders are there, and this is what the query I got. So you can see earlier there was only one variable called question. Now there is an additional variable called query. This is what that this one is doing. Dot assign is actually doing this thing. It is making sure this variable query is going there as an additional variable. Okay. So we can see now whenever we create this final things executed, we have the query as a let's say an extra variable. Okay, and that is what we got. Next we will see what happened and how we got that result variable. So when I click on the result variable, you can see result has already input those two things, question and query, and then it got one more variable called result in the output, right? So when we were at this particular stage of up to this point, whenever we executed, we already got three variables, one question which was already there when we executed the thing, and then later we got this two variable called query and the result. That's what we could see. This is what it is happening. And finally, once we have all of those things, let's look at that final rephrase prompt, what has happened. Now you can see final rephrase prompt was very small because we saw that thing. It is saying that, hey, we have this question, we have this query, can you formulate the answer based on this result? And this is, we got again an AI message and our final output parcel, which gives us the plain thing, right? Isn't it beautiful? We could see what's happening at each stage, and that kind of made me more interesting about the LangChain. I started spending more time because of that. Okay, good. Now we have a natural language to SQL bot ready that actually take a natural query, generate the query, execute the query, and rephrase the answer. Even if you have this thing, it is good enough for you that you can build something which has some use case or usability. But we don't want to stop here. As I told you, what if I want to add some few short examples, because your problem statement may be difficult and by default model is not able to answer them well. So maybe you want to add some examples so that it can, so let's add some couple of examples. I think I have 5 6 examples what I put here. So example format, you can see example is nothing but the list, and each element in that list is a dictionary with the two keys. One is the input, basically what user is saying, in that case what human is saying, and next is the expected output, which is the query, which is what, let's say, assistant or AI is saying. This is what we got, right? So let's look at now how can we create the few short prompt. To create the few short prompt, there is a space. So earlier we have used whatever the default prompt. So we haven't used any custom prompt at the moment to generate the SQL query. Yes, we did use the custom prompt to generate the final rephrase answer, but not for the generate query. But now we're gonna actually, let's say, create that particular prompt. So this is what few short chat promptlet requires. Okay, I would say few short chat message prompt template require. It requires, first thing, example prompt. It is saying whatever the examples you're gonna add, how do we format this example, how do we format that each example, it is explained here. So we are saying, hey, whenever we're gonna pass you an example, it needs to be formatted like the set of these two messages. The first message will be from the human, so whatever inside the input, you should call it as a message from the human, and then some SQL query is like an anchoring so that it can generate the SQL query, and the AI part will be the whatever query. So we are saying, hey, if we have example like this, make it as a human message and then the subsequent AI message. That's what we are saying. And then it is saying, okay, where are those examples? So these examples are nothing but the list of those examples. Finally, we have to tell in this whole scenario what exactly the variable. So here I'm not sure, I sometimes I got confused with this particular thing. I think this input is maybe what we're gonna send as a question and not basically these input variables, something like that. So maybe you guys can focus, but my understanding is this input is not the input from here. this input variable is what I am passing as an input variable. That's what my understanding. So let's see how does the few shot prompt look like, right? So we can see, let me run this thing. So this is also another beauty. We saw earlier that we have created chain using other chains. This is also chain, this is also chain, and we created one big chain. Similarly, you can see we have this prompt template, and that prompt template we're gonna reuse here, and we're gonna create this few short chat template. And then you will see in the further that we will again use this thing and build something on top of it, right? So kind of again kind of a composable or something, you can say, right? Let me run this thing so you can see what's happening. Maybe I would say, let's see what's happening. Oh, examples is not defined because I haven't run. Let me run it. Oh, now you can see this is how few shot example looks like. This is what I mean. This is how it is formatting each example, because we told it that, hey, we want to format like this. Human message will be like this, and then this will be the corresponding AI message. That's what we mentioned in that example prompt formatting here. And you can see all whatever, because we have I think 6 or 5 6 example, all we can see here coming. How many we are seeing? This is 1 2 3 4 5 6. We have 6 examples, and also we are seeing now. If you see, I think it doesn't require any. Does it require this all this variable table info? I don't see it is using top k. It is not using. Let me remove and see what happens, because I might be using them later. Okay, good. So I think it was not required. So that input basically this one what we are sending, and I'm sure it is this one. Oh, it is still running. Even so, whatever we are passing, it is actually treating it as an input. That's what my understanding. Okay, that this particular input one, this value is going there as an input. Let's see if maybe as we go forward it will help. But there is no, what if instead of 6 you have this 20 30 examples, and we don't want to put all of this example in the prompt. So we want to select, let's say if I am asking something related to the customer payments and something, I want payment example. If I'm asking something related to the stock of the product, then I want this particular example, right? Instead of having all of this example. That's where we want to do a dynamic few shot example selection. And the good thing, LangChain has something inbuilt that help us to select the example. It's called the example selector, a semantic similarity example selection. It means whatever the query that we're gonna ask, it's gonna check that query or that natural question semantic score with each of these, let's say the queries we have, and whatever we want top two, top three, it's gonna select. So this is how we can build. So the first thing, we import this semantic similarity example selector, and we are seeing, so there is a method called from examples. Basically we are giving the list of examples. Here is the examples. You require some embedding, because to calculate that semantic similarity we're going to calculate the embedding. Then some vector store where we're going to store those examples so that we can match them semantically. Finally the k is equal to 2 means how many top example we want to select. So I just want two matching example, and here also input key is I think this input. Now let's run this thing and see what happens, what example we get. So I'm asking who is highest paying customers, and see what top two examples I got. It is saying get the highest payment. So something related to the highest payment, and other thing is related to the credit. I would say still both are related to, let's say, a payment and credit matching example, right? Who is the highest paying customer, let's say. And again I can ask simply the other simple question, maybe that same one, let's say how many employees we have, and I hope it will have something related to that employee question. Matching two questions will be related to the employee. Retrieve the names of the employee who report as something related to employee. You can see we got something credit because there is only one, let's say, the employee related question, and we have given k is equal to 2, and there is no threshold. So basically it is just coming up with its another example, right? Because we want top two example, no harm into that, so we can simply put them, right? So this is how. Now we got some logic, something called example selector. Let's use this example selector inside our few short prompt that what we just created. So let's go and see how we can do very simple minor change. So when we create this few short prompt template that we just created, instead of giving examples, sorry, here, instead of giving example, we say take the instance of the example selector, because the example selector already has the examples. Now let's see whether it works. Earlier we saw we got all of those examples, right? We saw 5 6 examples we got. This time how much examples we got? How many products are there? Top k is equal. I think again this top k or something, I'm not sure why did I put, because I was experimenting so much. We will see if we need them. And let's see. Good. Now we got this formatted particular thing. Earlier, see, example selector is only giving list of dictionaries. Eventually this example prompt formatting, this part is actually formatting into the human and AI messages, and they will become part of our let's say the request, right? And as I told you, this few short chat promptlet taking another prompt template inside, but now we can make this few, because we saw our final example is not just only few short example. There is some instruction before it, and then you have few short examples, and maybe we want to add after that, right? So let's create a final prompt, a more customized prompt. So we are, see, this is what. So earlier we saw how do we create the prompt, let's say template. Let's see the earlier, if you look at the syntax of the earlier one. So I think we saw multiple ways of creating the prompt. So let's say when we saw this simple prompt, we can see we are creating prompt from the template, basically a a string with the placeholder. The next, we could also create the prompt messages. So basically it will take the list of messages. You can see these are, because this one thing is message can be represented by the role or from whom it came, and basically the content or that message. So this is nothing but list of messages. So this was actually made up from the messages. And this is also another style of creating the let's say we are also creating from the messages. This time we create one system message which has that long instruction what we have regarding SQL, and this is where that table info, where all those table schema and their sample, this is gonna come here. And then our few short prompt, basically this small thing will become part of that. And finally the question that user is asking, so that we can answer, right? It will be interesting to see it now. Let's see that thing. See, this is how now our customized prompt become. This is our system instruction up to this point. Yeah, there's some table info, because just for the printing I don't want to actually call that. So I just created some placeholder, because we know that there is one placeholder called table info, you can see here. And for the printing purpose I just put something here, so that because my focus is on example and not the table info. So you can see this is our system example, some table info here. It is going to be big info, and this, not this one, yeah, this is our few short examples. And finally this one is human, is our final thing, is our human input, this one. If you're not sure I can show you. This is what we said, right? So I can type something after that, and so that you're sure that it's actually, let's say that the final one is what we just created. Yeah, you can see the final one is what we that one is the final. This is what our prompt looks like. Now we are ready. Earlier we created our database chain without giving a prompt. Now this time let's give it a prompt. So let's create again that same create SQL query. Now with this two earlier variable, we're gonna pass our prompt now, final prompt. So we updated our general query. Everything remains still same. Nothing has changed. We still have our execute query, which is there unchanged. We have a rephrase answer, which is also unchanged. Only thing we change is the create SQL query chain, and that's what I updated here. Let's run this thing, and we're gonna go to the LangChain to see whether we are selecting those proper examples or not. Let's run it with the spelling mistake I see there. Okay, so there are 85 customers with this particular credit thing, right? We just saw. Now go and let's go and look at the LangChain whether we got those steps properly or not. Go back to the LangChain, or sorry, the LangSmith. This is what we ask: how many customers with the credit, and we are more interested in that particular step where actually that step where we got those few short examples, and it has to be the part of the query generation, because that's where we are using them for the query generation. Look at the prompt here. So this is the chat OpenAI prompt. Again you can see our the table info has now mainly tables, customers, and all of those, because we haven't yet selected dynamic tables. We are still working on the examples, but after this schema finishes, we know we have our few short examples. What happened? Below are the number of example question and answer. Okay, sorry. So this is one message, system message, that is finished, right? Because we know that chat take the messages, right? So system message was those big. Now you can see list of all customers in France with the credit and then get the highest payment. You know, these two are our few short example. And why they're coming like a human and AI message? Because we told it needs to be like that. So we told it that, they needs to be formatted like a human and AI message, and we could see those two messages coming. This is the first pair, this is the second pair, and finally ours, the question that we asked. So this is few short and this is what we are asking, and we got this SQL query. So we see we are able to select the dynamic example. Let's try something else so that we are sure, or maybe it will become repetitive. I think it's working, so let's go to the next because I see video is already getting long. We haven't reached even the streamlit part. So okay, let me go back to the part where we are dynamically selected those examples. Good. Next step, how do we select those relevant tables? Because this is very big. If you look at the system prompt has those 9-10 tables, whereas we might require only what? The query require only customers tables and nothing else, and we have all of those things. So let's go back. And how can we do that thing? Relevant table. So the first thing, what I did, I created one CSV with the table name and it's a description. See whether I have this table description, a small description. So I have a table called product lines and I put a couple of line description here saying that, hey, this particular table hold this information. So these are the 9 tables I have, because I'm gonna use this information to decide based on the user query which are relevant tables. This will help. Ideally, even these names are intuitive for GPT, but what if you have very weird names? It's always better to give some description to this particular table so that GPT can choose. So this is just the pre-processing part. Here what I'm doing in this particular part, I'm just reading my CSV, and you can see I have this big long string of my table name and its description that I'm gonna pass inside the prompt. Next, I'm creating a prompt called table details prompt that take my table details, and I'm asking ChatGPT, since I'm gonna share this notebook with you, I just don't want to read line by line. It's getting late already. It's in a long video. So this will simply help us, what are the relevant table based on the query. And we are using some LangChain utility, something called create extraction chain pidehead tick. Okay, the name, I don't want to go into that name details. What basically it takes an LLM instance, it takes our prompt, and it helps us to extract those table or let's say object in a format that we specify. So I have specified pydentic is some kind of a, let's say, data type, right? We are saying a schema that I want you should extract me a thing called a table, and I have declared what does table mean. So you can see on the top I have declared a schema. This base model coming from, yeah, pydentic model. Like if you are fast API, you might have seen something like this. So we are saying, hey, there is some, let's say, the entity or table called it's something called table, which has only one thing called name, and that will be the name of that particular table. And if you are giving me something, it has to be the table object. That's what we mean actually, this particular thing. And so given all of this thing, let's see whether we get those table objects. So we ask, give me details of customers and their order counts. So based on this prompt, ChatGPT thinks that maybe the customers and the orders are the only relevant table, and you can see it has given us in a format that we want. Now this might be thinking like little thing, but actually this will become much more important if you want to extract some other information also. So here we are just saying that table, give me the table and its name, and this is what we got from it. Now let's say how can we use it. So basically, one of the things we haven't seen it, one thing is that there is a way to manipulate actually this chain to use certain variables. For example, I should have explained that thing earlier. So I did commented something. So when we create the DB instance, right, this database thing, we can actually specify the sample rows, how many sample rows we want. you can say we are actually having the three rows, but we can also say that hey, only include one rows, sample rows in the table. We can decide what tables we want to include, right? And we can also pass a custom table information if you want. Rather than using this table information, we can pass some custom table information. Maybe I should show you so that it's clear. This again, I should have actually shown this thing when we started that time itself. So let me comment this thing, and let's say I'm saying that I just want one sample row and only include these two tables, and we have seen that earlier it was many tables, right? So let's execute and do these things. Okay, so go up. What's happening? So still it has many tables. Okay. Custom table info is not defined. Okay, because I told you, right, we can pass a custom table info. Let's say the custom table info is some string, and I pass this thing. What happened now? Type error. Table info must be a dictionary with the table name as a keys and something like that. Oh my god, I should have created that thing. Maybe I can ignore that variable for now. Maybe when I did a practice that time I did experiment with this also, but okay, why not? Let's quickly create that one. If I just maybe this I don't know. Let's see if it can take only one thing and solve the problem. Okay, it took anyway. So we created, now let's see what we got. Okay, you can see we got only two tables because we told it to only use two tables. But then, and we see only one sample, what do you call, only one sample row, because we also mentioned that, select only one sample row. I think this customer, you know what? This is that custom table info that we just put, right? If you want to put anything additional there, right? So I don't have a good example here, maybe, but you can see you could manipulate this thing, what needs to be passed, right? But actually for us, let's say we want all of those things, right? And let's keep it to the default what we have. Okay, why I came here, just like we saw these couple of variables, the include tables. So in the prompt the variable name is called, actually I think, tables to include or something, we will see, and we're gonna manipulate that particular variable. That variable we're gonna manipulate. Can we see that variable here if it is there? Actually, okay, I don't see that variable here, but anyway, let's go back to the thing what we're gonna do. Okay, yeah, so we saw that we are able to get those table names, but let's do one thing first. I want just those tables as a list of string and not let's say those table instance. That what I did, a simply iterating them and generating whatever I want. Another thing, I added an extra thing. So here you could see I am passing it as an input because the prompt inside it expecting a variable name called input. But the thing is that when I'm going to execute, you see all the way, we are using a variable called question. So just to handle this case, what we are doing, hey, whatever I'm going to pass to the question, assign to the variable input, so that we have this input variable here, which is get available here, just to handle that particular thing. Now let's create the chain, which will use our new thing called select table scenario. Now how we going to use this thing? This is what I told you, right? So we are actually creating one variable called table names to use, and this is a specific variable is actually available here inside this generate query. So I think in the source code or wherever it is happening, it checks did we got any specific set of tables that we want to include. If not, use all the defaults. So here we're going to manipulate, we're going to say, hey, we're going to pass you the list of tables that we care about, and that's what happening. So we just saw above that whenever we do something dot assign, some extra variable, it's going to get available to the next chain that what we have, and that's what going to happen here. So let's say I'm going to ask how many customers with order count more than 5, and there are two customers. But now let's go to the LangSmith and see really whether we got only those selected tables or not. I go to the LangSmith, is the default, and how many customers are there? This is customers, right? How many customers? Correct, we got the answer, but that's not the interesting part. Take this, because we know the first step is actually table names to use. Let's see what happened there when I click on there. you can see table names to use only customer because that's what it is required. So the step what happened, table names to use, which is this particular prompt, you can see that prompt will have our information. So that prompt has our information, you can see the table and their description, and finally GPT decided, okay, hey, we just need one table called customers, and that will get used ahead. So in the query final, if you look at the when the query generated that particular prompt, sorry, I clicked somewhere else here, correct this one. Now we see our system prompt has become very small. Now we have only one table, you can see the customer and its records and nothing else. That's how you can save the token. And sometimes, as I told you, what if you have hundreds of tables, you need to come up with some way. Now you might say, hey, anyway we are costing some let's say the prompt tokens here also, but that is still feasible because you can represent, one table with, let's say, two lines of things, and you can still handle your 50 tables in one single prompt. But it will be really tricky and difficult thing to put all that 50 table schema here, because the schema, it might have hundreds of columns, it will be difficult, right? So at least it is still better to have some description and then ask GPT to choose what we want, even though we require some extra request to do that thing, else it will not become feasible for you if you have many such a thing, right? So we just saw we are able to now pick up, we are able to pick up this particular thing as there are two customers with an order, and pick up those relevant tables. Okay. And okay, one more thing I wanted to show you, as I told you that till the point we never ask any follow-up question, we ask all those questions. Now this is I want to show you that till the point whatever we have built is not the correct thing actually. It can't answer the follow-up question, and let's test this thing. So I ask, there are it is saying there are two customers with the order count more than 5. Now I want to ask a subsequent question, can you list, let's say, their names. That spelling might be not be correct, maybe this one, or is this wrong? Anyway, GPT should understand. Now I'm asking, can you list their name, and see what happens, whether it really understand my subsequent question or not. The names of the customer in France with credit limit greater than 20,000. Now you see, I never ask about the credit limit, and it is giving me something related to credit. It means it is not understanding my follow-up question, but the demo I saw show you there, it is able to understand that follow-up question. It means we need to add some memory to the chatbot so that it remembers key what was my earlier question and what was the earlier answer for that particular question, and that's what we're gonna do at the moment. To do that thing, we have to modify our chat prompt template, those final prompt template, and add one more thing to it called the message placeholder. So earlier prompt, you see we have a system instruction, we have few short example, and then we directly had our user query, what user is asking. Now in the middle, we gonna create a placeholder which will hold our conversation history. So in the LangChain, if you are not sure what gonna come here, what kind of message gonna come here, so you can use something called message placeholder. And I'm saying, hey, I'm gonna pass you something called messages that's gonna have the list of messages that you have to put it here. That's what it means, and we can verify that thing. So let's say currently I'm not passing anything. So I'm not passing anything in that messaging array, and that's why you don't see anything coming here. But let me show you that we can pass something there. So let's go and add some memory to it. So I'm using some simple thing called a chat message history, which is basically gonna store all this history in the form of messages. So I declare that particular object, right? And then what we do, we can use this history. Let's see what's happening here. Rephrase, how many customers, and okay. Where is this? So we created this chat history. I think, did I miss something? So we got this chat invoke, and we got this history table, select table assign, but we are not using this history anywhere, right? Okay, we are invoking here down here. So we just created that chain here, we're not invoking. That's why I got confused that why we are not actually using it here, right? So you can see we declare our chat message history. We again have our same thing, but as I told you, we updated our prompt because we added something extra. So this prompt is a part of our create SQL query chain. So we have to regenerate that particular chain. So we created that chain again with the prompt, the latest prompt what we just added with the message placeholder. And next what? Next, we declare the chain. So it has everything, nothing changed. It has the same variable what we saw on the top. Here, nothing changed. Only thing is that when I'm gonna invoke this particular chain, I'm gonna pass one more variable or call something message. Why? Because one of the step in this particular thing is called generate query, is expecting that variable to become. And let's run this thing. So first let's declare this thing, which is the same thing. So I'm not explaining because nothing has changed. Now we are passing this message array and let's see what we get. I ask how many customers with order count more than 5. We got this thing. And let's see whether there was anything in the messages. So maybe I go to the LangChain, I go back to pick up the one which I just recently asked, and you can see when we ran there is no messages because that chat doesn't have any history. See, we just created a chat message history here and we haven't put any message inside it, so there is no history associated with it. That's why you see the message is getting empty. But the next moment I'm going to add, now I'm saying, hey, let's add some history. So we are saying in that chat history, this one is the user message and this one is the AI message. So there are two messages inside it. Now I'm passing those history.messages. So those history.messages will give, if I want to show you, let me just add it and so that I can show you. And maybe I just print this history.messages so that you are clear. They are getting as a messages. So this history object has a field called messages that can give me those list of messages. See, human message and the AI message, because as I added user message, it become the human message, and the AI message is the AI message. The content is what we had asked. Let's say question and the response. Understand the now let's invoke the same chain. Now let's go back with the history.messages so that it knows what was my previous question and it should be able to answer. We see whether this message memory is going inside it or not. So if I come here, click on this latest message, and okay, I go back the names here, of the customers and then I could more than 5 orders. Now it understand my first question was about the can you customers having more than 5 orders, and eventually understand that this was about the customers who has more than 5 orders, and it actually able to list. Now see what's happening here. Let's go back. As I told you, let me tell you again, this is how I understood. Each step here, this step is actually getting a variable called table names to use. This variable is let's say this particular step is where we are getting the query. So I'm interested in this part, so I'm going into its prompt. So I could see the prompt here, but I like to see here because I can see input and output both, what goes to the model, right? Okay, so oh, you see all of these tables has come, something wrong. Anyway, I will see what is wrong, but first see whether we are getting those correct messages or not. And let's see what has happened. You could see, our prompt format. The prompt has first few short example, then conversation history, and then our input. So just above our input we have that conversation history. So let's go back and see. You can say this was our let's say input, can you list the name, and just above it we have our conversation history, which is earlier message, how many customers with the order count and this was the answer. So we can see the messages are going inside it, right? Now the problem that we saw is that a big system prompt, let's see what is the issue with that. And we know this is part of this particular step called table names to use. Let's click here and see what's happening here. Oh my god. So here when we so we ask something like this, can you list their names? And our prompt which we created, this one, where is the prompt that we created? I think, yeah, down here, which takes our table details and our question and tells us what is the relevant things. But this particular prompt don't have access to our history. We haven't put the history here, so it is not actually aware what is this thing. So when it came across something like this, can you list their names, what it did, it simply decided to use all the tables, right? Because if you look at the prompt will be like this, based on so this is what OpenAI prompt it sent actually. But to decide what is this input, right? So this was the prompt, what it generated. Yeah, it generated the query. So I don't want to look at the query prompt, I want to look at this one. So let me expand this. I want to look at the table selection prompt. So if you look at the table selection prompt, what happened, it got all this table description, and this I got, can you list their names? Now it don't have enough context to decide which tables to use, so it simply decided to use all the tables, and that's why it outputted all the table, right? So make sure if you are using some external prompt like what we are using, it should also have some access to the history or the refine query, so that it can understand which tables to choose. That was good learning. So maybe you guys, when you build these things, make sure this prompt also you do something so that it has access to what was the previous message. So this was good. Video got long actually. I have to so when I check, my recorder was already stopped recording, so I had to re-record certain part of it because it has some limit how many minutes it. So this is the second time I resume. Now let me go back to the let's say the Streamlit code, sorry, where I have integrated all of those things, and I hopefully quickly explain what is there. So let me go back to the Streamlit. So Streamlit we have already seen here, right? So if I go back and sorry, not this one, yeah, the Streamlit we have already seen whatever this thing. So this basically is Streamlit chatbot, where we could see a set of messages coming. This is something coming from the user, and this robot icon, this is coming from the AI. So the messages that what we are rendering has some properties that decide whether it is a user message or whether it's a, let's say, AI message. And you could see there is something for the new input that I could put basic chatbot functionality, and we will see. I know many of you already seen these kind of things in other videos or even my videos. So let me go back and see what's happening here. So the first thing we are doing here is actually, let's say, adding some title to our Streamlit. That's what we saw, the LangChain natural language to SQL part. Next we are declaring our OpenAI key. Next we are storing this OpenAI model in the session variable, but actually I'm not using it anywhere. I think I'm not using anywhere this particular model name as such, because yeah, I think I could have just ignore it. The important thing is the messages. So whatever you see, it is coming on here, this coming from, let's say, session messages, whatever we have. And so we are declaring a Streamlit session variable called messages, and we are saying, for here we are saying if there is no existing message variable, it means there is no conversation and those messages will be empty. And if it is there something, we want to iterate through these messages, and based on their role, which is this Streamlit chat message role, I want to display this content. And these three lines are making all of that what you just saw here, right? It is deciding which role and rendering that particular message here, right? So this is what that's happening. Next we are taking input from the user here, and if I got the input, I'm updating my that message array, so that next time so whenever I ask something, right, so whenever I'm going to ask something, it's going to appear there. And that's what so whenever I'm going to ask something, it's going to appear there, and that appearing is happening here, this particular part. So whenever I'm going to ask something, it again get display, and eventually we wait for the GPT response, or let's say this is where whole LangChain is happening. Here I am calling a function called invoke LangChain, and eventually whenever I got the response, I also update that response in this message array so that it get display on the UI like this. Some error came, okay, maybe something related to how many customers with order count more than 5. Anyway, some error has come, maybe it was not the correct query or something. Some intermediate step has failed, so it requires, it means it require a better handling. This Streamlit has a lot of issues. How many customers with the order count more than 5? Anyway, so we can always go and check what's happening under the hood, right, and debug it as we just saw earlier. So that should not scare us. So let's go and see what's happening in the invoke chain function. So invoke chain is simply taking the my prompt and my messages. Prompt here is, the prompt is actually the user input, so I should have used some different name. I just copy this code from the Streamlit official website, the sample code what they have. Now if I go to the invoke chain function, see what's happening in the invoke chain function. First I'm getting my chain, the final chain what we saw here. I'm getting that particular chain. I will show you this one, the final chain. Next, I'm creating a history, because in Streamlit it is very tricky. So I make sure every time I'm answering something, I'm creating that message array based on whatever the session messages I had inside the Streamlit. so that history get populated based on this session messages. That's what I'm doing. And finally I'm invoking that particular chain, and then I'm adding those things to our history, so that bot is able to handle, because I'm passing that history. So let's see exactly. So gate chain, what it is doing? Gate chain, it is doing that same thing what we have done. It created our database object, it declare our OpenAI model, it declare our generate query chain, execute query chain, rephrase chain, and then this is our final chain by using all of those things. And I'm returning this chain here. That's what it did. Create chain. Next, create history. Basically, create history will take the list of messages which is coming from that Streamlit sessions, and we see if there is a user role, and this we add the user message, yes, AI message, and we know that this history we are actually using while creating the response based on those follow-up questions. And then finally, whatever the chain I got, I'm invoking the question that I got from the user, because you see in the main we have passed the first thing as a question. And top k3, again, did we use this variable anywhere? I think I miss. Maybe you guys can check whether we are even using this variable. I don't think we are using it anywhere, this particular variable somewhere, but let it be now there. And this message is particular the history dot messages what we are passing, the same thing what we did, and we are updating our history to make sure it loop in the loop it runs, everything is fine. And all of those details, now you might be saying, okay, when I'm getting change, when is the other details, right? Where are those details are coming from? So basically this db user and all of those information coming from the environment variable which I declared. So here's an environment file which has all of this. As I said, I will be sharing the code, and there is nothing much that is tricky here, simple thing what we just saw. And then again create SQL query chain, this thing, answer prompt. So from where this prompt is coming, so I put all the prompts inside this prompts.py. So you can see that we have a how to format our few shot example prompt. This is our few shot prompt, this is our final prompt which uses the few shot prompt which we saw, and finally this is the prompt which rephrase our answer. All of those prompts we already saw inside the notebook, and from where those prompts we are getting. And all of the things what we see here I store all those examples actually stored here. The example selector code is also here, because that's, let's say, related to this particular thing. What this cache resource, since whenever we execute something on Streamlit, it reloads that whole page, and we don't want to keep creating this chroma and this thing again and again. So we can do something called cache resource, so that it does only once. That's what is happening here. So go back to this LangChain utilities, and I think invoke query messages, nothing else. Yeah, is there anything that step we see? Okay, this one, select table. So we have this select table that we imported, which is coming from a table details file. So if I go to the table details, basically here I have that code which actually read the the table description, then create that table pydentic model, then get those table name and the list, and eventually that table details prompt. I could put this prompt here inside the prompts, but I just decided to put here in the right. And then here we have our table chain that we are importing. Nothing new. I just simply reorganize this code so that it works well with the Streamlit, right? And the only Streamlit part which I already explained, basically iterating to those messages, making sure that message state object has all of this information. Once you have the code, I think that will be easier for you to understand. And we just, if you want, we can just rerun that code again. Let's kill that process and rerun that again and see whether everything is fine. So we could run something called streamlit run main.py, and yeah, it's running. Maybe some warning we got related to the cache. Okay, let's ask those questions again what we were asking, where we got the error. How many customers with order count more than 5? You can see gate chain, the first time it is getting that chain we are creating, right? What we saw, and it is now generating the response. So we saw the gate chain which was what is this again, some warning. See, the gate chain also we have a cache resource, so the next time if I ask any query, we don't want to again create that chain. So there are let's say 2 customers with an order. I think that 2 and 3 is getting confusing. Not sure. Let's ask the follow-up questions. Can you list their names? This time that query, that chain creation didn't happen because it is cached already, right? That's what it is doing, the names of those particular customer. So working good. I will be sharing all of this code with you, including these things. I haven't spent much time on it, but I think it's pretty easy. Everything is there already structured. Anyone can go through line by line and understand what's happening. Hopefully you found this video useful, because I try to use all my knowledge, whatever I learn, creating this natural language to SQL chatbot for our client. Most of the times I used to build this thing from the scratch, all this functionality, but then I observe a lot of those things are already part of the LangChain. And this time I created those all things what I used to do using scratch, using now LangChain, and I could see how efficient this particular thing. But it requires a bit patience and understand the underhood concepts in the LangChain, so that you become productive again, right? Hopefully, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, you guys can subscribe and let me know if you have any queries or any next video ideas you have. Thank you.